Hello, everybody, and how are you? And welcome to Assignment 3, School Partnership Plan, the Keynote and Screencast. I'm Peter James Smith, and this is for EDU 722 at St. Louis University with Dr. Skanga, and it's October 3rd, 2020. And we're going to go through a little bit about dual language immersion, which is the topic of the problem that we're going to be solving in the school and creating this plan around. So anyway, let's move on to the first screen here, and it says this is our school, Hugh J. Boyd Junior Elementary School in Seaside Heights, and the white says Una Escuela Bilingüe, which means a bilingual school, because Seaside Heights and the community school, obviously, are becoming more and more bilingual, or we'd like them to become more bilingual, because there's a disconnect right now of people who can speak English and people who can speak Spanish, but not a lot that can speak both. And we want to make it bilingual, because by 2049, I learned this at St. Leo, just an aside, Spanish is going to overtake English as the most spoken language in the United States. So, and it's just growing in Seaside Heights. It's already happening here and in a lot of other places. So anyway, the core value usually comes last, but I made it first, and it says, Para toda la comunidad inglés y español, which means for the entire community, English and Spanish are the answer. And it says, Dos vale más que uno, and two is worth more than one. So in our core values, which are there's 6 of them that we have to know for St. Leo. Most of them in my instructional leadership masters and now in this postdoctorate in school leadership have been about community and how to build the community. And this is a community project with the school and how they come together. And always keep that in mind as you read the things. They always have a commonality that they're always for the school and the community. So, okay. Then, all right, so identified issue. With such a split in home language, it is necessary for both sets of native speakers to understand each other and each other's language. And so this table shows, this is from the New Jersey Department of Education, and it shows the, the language split, and it's 56% English at home speaker and 40%, and I would bet the Spanish is low. The number is really, really low. So anyway, this talks about what we plan to do, which is dual language immersion courses provided to the entire community via Zoom. Now, by doing Zoom, we have lots of options. First of all, it could be seen by everybody in the town. And they do have to just go to different Zooms that we would make, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But what is dual language immersion? Grayson defines it as biliteracy, listening, speaking, reading, and writing both languages by speakers. And in our situation, it's Spanish and English. But in other places in the state, it's Hindi and English, and Arabic and English, and other languages. If we had a sudden influx of Hindi people here, Hindi-speaking people, we would have a third language issue. But we would have to deal with it because we have to deal with it. But by learning together in a 50-50 language situation, which means 50% in Spanish, 50% in English, the learners can learn by each other's side. It would be like this. I would be with, say I was the one teacher who was the English language speaking native, and I had a bilingual buddy with me who was a native Spanish speaker who also spoke English. We would teach the class together, and I would say, oh, Senora Sandra, ¿cómo dice cell phone en español? And she would say, oh, sí, móvil. And that is what is said. And then she would repeat back, Senor Smith, dice que móvil en español, en inglés, a cell phone. You see, it's just repeated back and forth. So the children and the students and the adults, whoever are the people in this 50% English, 50% Spanish speaking group, will learn each other's language by that comparison, by being taught in one language and then the other, and then having to learn the vocabulary words and write them down and practice with them, listening to them, speaking them, reading them, and writing them. And they're going to be put on by Zoom. And the reason we picked Zoom is, I'll get to that in a second, but first it asked in the rubric, like who would be responsible for these things. And it would be the Seaside Heights Board of Education. These people here, including Peter Smith, who is a board member, who is me. Thank you very much. So hang on one second. Then these other people, this is the man in the maroon shirt, and is Dr. Parla Panides, our superintendent. And in the blue t-shirt there, this is beach day. We live on the beach. That's why they're dressed like that, is because they are the educational professionals who would bring forth the curriculum. And the other people who are on the little board that we have are me, and I'm in the yellow, and Louise Pesci, who is one of our supervisors in the school at the time. And hang on just one second. I want to hit that. For some reason, I'm not able, like my cursor doesn't, I don't know. I don't know why it's doing that. But anyway, this is Mr. Kevin O'Shea, and he's the business administrator, and he's actually a CPA, not an MBA. But he's in charge of the budget. And actually, the budget is not much. It's not very impactful to do what we're doing because we already own a Zoom package. We already have staff, and we already have the things that we need are mostly free. Like on the students' end, and I'm talking students of all ages, from cradle to, almost grave, to grandparents, would be using their own stuff at home. And Kevin has designed a bunch of stuff that we'll talk about in a minute to arrange these things to happen throughout the community, working with the borough administrator. And it's very interesting that that's what he does, because we're a small town, we're only 3/4 of a mile long and a half mile wide out in the middle of the ocean on a barrier peninsula. So, we're only a little place. So anyway, why Zoom? Well, first of all, the school owns a Zoom package, and so does the borough, but we're using the school one. And that it has the power to be recorded and watched later. So if you miss the Zoom live, you can always go and catch it up on it later, although you probably wouldn't be able to participate in some of the group activities with the other students. That would be the only drawback of that. And you would have power to reach many people at once. I think at least 100 people would be able to go to the Zooms, and maybe more. I'm not sure what the package is that the school has, because the minimum Zoom package is 100. And then students of the entire community can go back and forth and rewatch lessons, and they can begin at any time. So say you've been going all along and you're watching lesson 5, and you decide you didn't catch what the Senora and Senor were saying, you could rewind back and you could watch it again and then learn the vocabulary again, review it on the screen, practice the listening, practicing all the different skills that are language arts skills that are needed. All those skills are needed for the higher level thinking order that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, the rigor for the standardized test that's coming up. You have to work with complex texts, and you have to do that in both languages, or what's the sense? Because we're doing the same thing. We want children to be biliterate in both languages, both sets. So everyone to talk to each other, and them to be able to go up to a monolingual person in Spanish, say in English, say I was born in Seaside Heights and I talked English native, and then I went through this dual language, which I kind of do because I do practice Spanish all the time at school for the past 20 years. It's immersed a lot of times, which this is too. But when you go there, if somebody walked up to me and only knew Spanish, I could have a basic conversation with them, and they would say, claro, comprendo. That means, clearly, I understand you. I'm not speaking perfect Spanish, but that's not really our goal. Like, no one's ever expected to be perfect at either language, but we want them to read and write it. But in the students' cases, especially the ones that are younger, we do want that, because by 8th grade they have to compete in these tests. And if they know both languages, they have to use higher level thinking skills, and that comes ahead in the higher maths and things like algebra. There's certain skills that you would have to learn then at 7th grade age that you'd know from childhood if you were bilingual, because you have to use the same ones to translate between the two languages. Very difficult to understand, and really not something I was getting into in this particular program, but something I thought I'd mention. And so you can go back and forth and rewatch anytime. Various Zoom sessions can be made for all ages, like this. There's a kindergarten to second curriculum, third through fifth, fifth through eighth, ninth through 12th, and then an adult. So we would need to have probably our teachers create the three younger ones, the ones through sixth, I guess through eighth grade, we'd say. And maybe we would have a volunteer or another teacher, because there are teachers in the community here that are ESL, English as a Second Language teachers, and Spanish teachers that we know personally that would come and give an hour of their time to donate it. And we'll talk about that too. Because like I said, this is a community project of donation of time. That's why it's not costing a lot of money. That's why budget really isn't a huge factor in this. So we wanted to make it as cheap as possible, and this is what I thought of. So anyway, various Zoom, it allows for social distancing while practicing both languages at once, which is sort of like a cultural thing maybe that's new in American culture, actually world culture. But I didn't consider that at the time, but I thought about it later. And then it didn't go with the other ones. But anyway, some of the things are mixed up. Like I'll talk about budget and things in the same screen, but I try to like tell you why, because they do go together that way. But the dual language teacher can create Zooms relevant to classroom learning. Like for instance, we would say they're doing a unit in social studies on World War II, right? They could say, well, Spain fought on the other side, on the Axis. That's something they could teach them. Mexico really didn't fight in World War II, but they did fight the Spanish-American Wars, and we could talk about those things and bring in the vocabulary and stuff that way, and the history that way, and they would learn a little bit about Spanish culture, about their own, the Spanish-speaking culture in Mexico, and then Americans would learn, I don't mean to say American, I mean the English-speaking natives would learn about it too, and because a lot of the children, you can't say Americans versus something else, because a lot of the children that need to be dual languagely immersed who are native Spanish speakers are Americans. They're born here. So anyway, then also I'll talk about cognates later, but just to bring it up, Queen Mary of England in the 1500s was married to the King of Spain. So a lot of the words, some of the words are the same. And I'll show you that when we go into certain other parts of things. So the histories of these countries relate back because they're close to each other. And it's interesting, I learned at St. Leo in the history of structure of the English language years ago that English is an Anglo-Saxon and Germanic language merged. But French and Spanish and Italian and Portuguese, and those are Romance languages. They come from Rome, the great Roman ancient empire. And that's something we could teach the children too. And that's why they're so similar. Like for instance, I'll just give you a quick for instance. In French, the word for I is je, and suis is am. Je suis, I am. And also in French, it's in Spanish, it's yo soy. So it's set up the same exact way. You just have to know different vocabulary words to fill in the blank. But how the sentences are structured and how the words go together is very similar, much different than English. And English has breaks a lot of rules. It's a hard language to learn. So it's probably harder for the Spanish-speaking children to really understand English because it doesn't have the rules that are always in place in every situation. And you probably could think of some, or we could think of some if we talked about it for a minute, but that's not the topic. But anyhow, so that's it. So, relevant to classroom learning. So anyway, let's move on to the next screen here. How we would implement it. First of all, there's 2 staff members. And this is really, what I'm talking about next is really a frill that doesn't have to be done, but we could possibly say add a 3rd teacher, but that would be very, very costly, extrapolated over many years, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're probably not likely to do that. But would probably more likely maybe in the future, if there was a need, would be, since there's one 5-day a week bilingual teacher, and then there's a 3-day-a-week Spanish teacher, maybe that other person could do 2 more days, and that would just mean, some additional salary, not an additional benefits package, essentially. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And if Dr. P, if you're watching, that is a frill of what we're talking about. In fact, it's the only frill in here that I even mentioned of spending money on the school level, perhaps, maybe, if that need ever rolled up. But the current Spanish teachers could help with a lot of the work, and then it could be farmed out to other people. Like, for instance, the next people I talk about are free, and they are interns from college programs anywhere for its virtual situation. Because it's a virtual situation. There's Kane at OCC across the bridge, and they have a Spanish language program with bilingual people. And so does Georgian Court University, which is in Lakewood, not that far from me. St. Leo has, I think, a minor in Spanish, but there's I'm not sure, but Dr. Rivera Singletary, who's one of my past professors, I spoke to her, and she said she has bilingual students that she would ask to help in this situation. So I said I would take it, but I haven't heard from any of them yet. I have to find a bilingual buddy, or we can't even start the implementation to just practice this, on a practice level. Now, we would continue to support the device internet access from T-Mobile, and that's from Kevin O'Shea. Kevin O'Shea is our business administrator, and he's also the one who I talked to about the hiring the other teacher. It would have to come out of the tax. We couldn't get like a Title III money or Title I money for that. It would have to come out of the tax burden, and that's very heavy, and we probably couldn't afford that. So he taught me that, and the interns was my idea. But continue to support the device. They're using T-Mobile for $20 a month. You can get internet service and a device, and it's going to be popular. And there's also Altice, our cable company. They have a very similar program too, but it's not what Mr. O'Shea and Mr. Vaz, the community business administrator, had in common to talk about. They talked about T-Mobile. Now the next one is utilizing Mr. Smith, me, and Mrs. Pesci to go out in the community to seek donations from the businesses for extra costs. Like, for instance, the only costs I could think of really that come to my head are perhaps we would pay the bill for the $20 for people who couldn't afford it. Maybe we could collect money for something like that, a few $1,000s a year. That would be the only thing I could think of. Or maybe like extra computers for us, like maybe a few iPads for us so we had multiple devices to work with, or things like that. But not really money for staff, because we could utilize existing and volunteer and intern staff to staff the program, because it's a school and a community program. Remember, we always have to think about it that way. And we would go out to our very rich business community. We have an amusement pier here, very wealthy people, lots of established businesses that have been here for a long time with plenty of money. So we don't have to worry about it. Now, this here, I'm just going to click on this for a minute and just show you a quick brief overview of this article here. And it did come up. In this case, it did. It's Color in Colorado, which is a bilingual site for educators and families for English language learners, ELLs. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. But this particular article does a few things. On this page, it will identify lessons and priorities learned about the program, access to devices, internet access, things we talked about, tech support and training, protecting student privacy, offline instruction at home, partnering for success, related news and updates. Now, if you go down here, you will see all the different things, lessons learned, families have a legal right to information in their home language, like all these different things that were learned about the dual virtual learning since the COVID situation, and about how you can partner with the PTA. This is a very interesting one. We don't have a PTA in my school for various reasons, but if we did, we could partner with them and raise funds and different things, which would help them as a solution. Exactly what I said. Help them on a solution for parents who could not access Wi-Fi due to barriers with registered housing and tech support and all different things. That's what I was thinking about with partnering with other people like T-Mobile. Tech support you might need. So it goes down the line of all the different things. And then building empathy with the multilingual tutorials. It would, like for instance, you could take a look right here at the Google Classroom in Chinese, like what it's like, and then you could see, help your colleagues understand what it's like to teach in another language. But in our situation, like I said, a bilingual teacher and a bilingual English-speaking teacher would be together, speaking together, working together, always translating, showing vocabulary, talking about background, showing how things worked and how the languages went together, and doing interactive and collaborative things with the children in things called breakout rooms, which we'll talk about. And so anyway, that's pretty much that. It's pretty much sums it up. Now, all I have to do is click back onto Keynote, okay, and it goes to the next one. Now, this is interesting. This explains how administrators and staff you can use Zoom, like how you connect to staff and teachers, school-wide announcements, IT support, counseling services. And then I think there's one other thing when you roll down here. Yeah, professional development, of course. You cannot do this without proper professional development. I learned in my other class, 712, that professional development is key because it has to be ongoing and it has to be relevant. So we can't just show them for like 5 minutes what a Zoom is like. We have to constantly practice better Zoom and better dual language immersion techniques, and they can be done by simply reading Color in Colorado, which we'll get to in a minute. And Zoom offers tons and tons and tons of webinars and different things on their website that you can learn to be the best Zoomer if you really put your mind to it. It's like a growth mindset. If you think you can, you will. That's Carol Dweck, Stanford University, one of the first things I learned here at St. Leo, in the master's program. So anyway, let's move up here. Oh, wait. Oh, I think I, oh, yeah, oh, I know why. Sorry, I have to click on to Keynote. And then, so I taught those things. Okay, now community partnerships. Now I want to click onto this. This is really interesting. This is when you go onto this page, and I guess it takes a minute to roll up. Here it is. And when it does, you go down a little bit, and there is a link here that I found, and it is about parents as powerful advocates. Now, this is strikingly similar to what we're doing. Yeah, so I know, because you have to open up the PowerPoint. And it'll open up in Keynote, and then it'll open up in PowerPoint in a second. There we go, my bilingual child. Now, look how similar this is to what we're doing. I'll go through it real quickly. Okay, so parents are advocates for their children, and everyone in the community should be advocates for this program. Everyone should be brainwashed. This is what we need. Language moms. The mission is to connect parents with each other, and in our case, students, the whole community with each other, as well as, and it says here, community members and organizations in advocating for new, expanded, and improved language immersion programs. Okay, then you have to choose what you're going to do, and ours, of course, is dual language. And best practices, which we'll talk about. I have some best practices that I would like to see as if I were the leader of the school per se, superintendent or principal or the building supervisor or the teacher leader, what I would want to see in, say, a walkthrough protocol. And in this case, it would be a virtual walkthrough protocol, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Identify the key players. We did that kind of talking about the Board of Education, the principal, and Louise and those people. Establish effective forms of communication. One thing I learned at St. Leo, and I think the quote is, communication is, it's like the worst thing about communication is that people thought that it happened. It's something like that. I'm not sure of the exact quote. I would have to look it up, and I'm not sure which professor quotes that often. I think it's Dr. Avsevsky, but I can't be sure. Or could be Dr. Z. I'm not positive. Or Dr. Carver. I've had so many over my time. But request support. So when we go to the Board of Education and we go to the administration and we go to the various community locales and reach out to the public, we're looking to request support. And we talked about the approval process. The Board of Education would have to pass a policy so that this could exist in the first place. I think I skimmed over that back when we were talking about the board, because this is the second time I had to talk about this topic. I got to 95% and it stopped. My computer froze. Thank you very much. You don't want that to happen to you. So anyway, so another thing about advocation is you have to create an online presence. Exactly what we're talking about. You have to develop relationships with the media. the news and the blogs and Facebook pages that parents go to, and should talk about these things and make an awareness of it. And the awareness is important. I'll talk about that later on. And encourage support. Encourage more parents and more community members and partners to join it, and to request appropriate models based on neighborhood demographics. And that's why I picked what we did. It's sort of a version of dual language immersion that's virtual, and it's a little bit different than like traditional. But you have to modify things based on your own needs. And the program access is throughout the school district, in our case, throughout the whole community, because once again, school and community have to be merged because it's a dual program. So anyway, that's not important. Stay engaged is very important. You have to be your child's #1 advocate. You can't give up. That's another one that says there. You have to recruit other parents, stay engaged, and stand up and speak, and remember your why we're here. Your children should be versed in both these languages and literate in them, biliterate in both languages. On your high school transcript, if you can pass a test that you can read, write, listen, and speak in 2 languages, you get a seal of biliteracy, and that opens you up to 21st century jobs, which we'll get to even a little bit later in a little more depth. Then, it says it right here. It says, it nurtures nurturing early development of bilingual or multilingual children who excel academically across subjects, interact effectively with people from other cultures, and compete successfully in the global marketplace. For instance, I think I might have mentioned a hair about it, but algebra and dual language bilingualism have something in common. These higher order thinking skills that are developed early, and then they translate to these other skills that are needed later in the 8th grade for the complex reading and for the complex maths that are so important. So that, I think, is that. Yes. And these are some other things some other links that are not really that important at the moment. So let me go back to Keynote. Keynote is Apple's. Where did it go? See, it went away. But I can find it easy. Oh, there we go. Bing. Okay, community partnerships, and you have to hit play again, sorry. Not everything is a perfect technology. And then I go ahead. All right, so, this is a quote that I've been using since I was in my early days in the instructional instructional leadership major at St. Leo, where I had my MED. So, inform yourself. So teachers have to take time to find out they have to take control of their own professional development if they're not getting it. Like looking at color in Colorado. Establishing a contemporary catalog of research and theory to underpin the innovation. Look for research-based theories that will underline the innovation, which is teacher leadership. In Victoria, Australia, that's what they call it, the innovation. This is where this quote comes from. And guide the development of a culture of change. I believe I did this with Dr. Efsefsky's class, but the first thing I ever took was Dr. Z's class, and it said that it was called Leadership for School Change. Schools have to change. They can't stay the way they are. Now I'm going to get a little bit into color in Colorado. And color in Colorado we could talk about for ages, but we're only going to briefly go through it because there's just so much. The site can't be reached. I know why. Because that is a glitch that, no problem, I did. Sorry. So anyway, here we go. Color in Colorado is right here. And if you notice, it has an audience. And the audience, you could be teachers, administrators, paraprofessionals, librarians, parents, and families. Let's just click on that one because we are talking about the entire community. And there's tips for families. And they can be in English or en Espanol. See? In English. So we're going to come back to English because we all are English native speakers and readers, at least most of us, here in our class that I'm aware of. So anyway, how to help your child learn to read, learning together at home, the preschool years, what you should do to make it's a really key time to help practicing letters and numbers in both languages, nursery rhymes in both languages, songs in both languages, wordless books in both. It's very interesting. Schools and families, an important partnership. It talks about partnerships, it talks about school success, all these, how to raise a bilingual child, how to use technology. Your library. A lot of people in the Latin American community don't think the library is for free, and that's silly. and because it is for free, and the more demand the library has, the more bilingual books and things it will buy. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So anyway, and then there's a video library, tools and guides, research and reports. Like I said, underpin the innovation by establishing a catalog of research and theory, and inform yourself. So that's where you do. But you could look through Color in Colorado all day. Like, let me just click here just for fun, and you can just see some of the things that come up. Culturally responsive instruction, community connection, ideas for supporting ELS. Let's just click on that one. It says a new wave of evidence, the impact of school, family, and community connections on student achievement. Click on that one. Gives you tons of information about how to perform what I'm exactly doing. And it says the research synthesis examines key issues in the field of family and community. See full report. So you have to click on that. I've spent years on this. Dr. Vasquez Matos, I hope I'm saying that right. It's either, I hope it's that, I think it's that order. He taught this same kind of course in my master's, because there's like introductory in my master's level, and now these are more advanced in the post-master's level. But he taught me about dual language immersion, and he showed me Color in Colorado and really helped me with that. And so did Dr. Rivera Singletary. She went from being a like picking grapes and things, like a vegetation, like migrant worker, to a PhD. So she's these kind of things are very important to her. And we talked about Spanish and Mexican and other culture role models, like Jose Hernandez, the astronaut who was on the International Space Station, the first Mexican American. So different people that we brought to the for cultural awareness and whatever. But there's so many things involved. But anyway, can't go all day about that, because you have obviously seen that that is a huge effort and a huge project. You could read all day, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years, is reading Color in Colorado. That's how I know so much about this, because it's such an issue in my school. Okay, so anyway, go on to the next one here. When you monitor, okay, well, I said if I was a principal, if I was a superintendent, if I was a teacher leader, I would want to do walkthrough or look